even if it's a melanoma. But remember, it's illegal for anyone but a dermatologist or an oncologist to treat skin cancer. So I'm not recommending that you treat skin cancer. The medical professionals will also tell you, beware the sun. Oh my God, the sun is evil. The sun is filled with cosmic radiation, and sun exposure creates death. Be very afraid of the sun. Well, if this were true, then everybody living on the equator would have skin cancer. But guess what? That ain't the way that it is. They'll also tell you that SPF is your friend and that you really need to lather up, baby. You need to cover yourself head to toe with that SPF. You need to take the SPF 365,000 stuff, man, and just slather it all over your body. They'll tell you that it's the photons that are the problem. It's the photons. Be very afraid of the photons. Although the scientific evidence is exactly the opposite. Oh, by the way, if you buy sunscreen greater than 15 or 20, you've just been played. Because the effectiveness of sunscreen tops off at right around 15 to 20. There's virtually no difference in the protection between SPF 20 and SPF 3 million. But, you know, Banana Boat wants you to think that there is. So again, let's try to take a breath and look at this from the proper perspective. Now, here's the statistical occurrence of skin cancer in the U.S. This is just in the United States. By the way, on this is the graph here. The more red it is, the worse it is. Green is really pretty good. You want to be green in this case. Now, if it was sun exposure, you would think everyone in Florida would have more skin cancer than anyone else. But look at this. What about Louisiana and Mississippi? Ever been to Louisiana or Mississippi? You know how hot it is there? You know how much sun they get? A lot. But look at this. Oregon has high levels of skin cancer. Oregon? You know, I lived in Seattle for 12 years, which is in the Pacific Northwest, right next to Oregon. The climate isn't much different in Oregon. The last time that I was there, it rained for 93 days in a row. Not a lot of sun exposure there, folks, I'm telling you. Let's take a look at the world, shall we? Now, yellow is good, orange, not so good, red, death. Hands down, the largest dissemination of melanomas worldwide is in Australia and New Zealand. They take the record. They are so far out in front of every other country, it's not even close. Keep this in mind as we move forward. What about these equatorial countries? You would think that if it had anything to do with that, then it would be relative that countries right around here, where the equator is, would have the greatest amount. But they don't. It's got nothing to do with solar radiation. Now, cancer of any type, skin cancer, lung cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, I don't care. One of the main causes of cancer is damage to the DNA. Now, the DNA is the part of the cell that gives the cell information on how to reproduce itself. So if you damage the DNA one of the things that happens is the cell can't stop reproducing itself. It just makes copies and copies and copies and copies and copies, and you get a tumor. Maybe it's malignant, maybe it's benign. You get a tumor because you've damaged the DNA. Now, ultraviolet light can damage the DNA. But in order for ultraviolet light to damage DNA, the exposure has to be massive, long, and intense. Now, a little bit of meteorology here. We've got the Earth, we've got the atmosphere, and we've got space. The top part of the atmosphere is capped off by a protective coating called the ozone layer. Everybody's heard about the ozone layer. What the ozone layer does is shield us from ultraviolet radiation from the sun, which is a good thing. If tomorrow the ozone layer disappeared, within a couple of years, everybody on the planet would have skin cancer. Because it's too much radiation, Couldn't handle it. But remember, we have evolved on planet Earth. We are part of planet Earth. Our bodies have wisdom and intelligence, and they know how to handle the stress of sun when everything's hunky-dory. However, when you dissolve the ozone away, and there ain't no more ozone, the country directly underneath where the ozone hole is going to get massive UV radiation. And that's what we think causes the New Zealand and the Australian numbers. It's the ozone hole burning away in a certain part of the planet. Which is backed up by another interesting datum point, which I'm going to show you in just a second. Now, you've all heard about UVA versus UVB, and it's nonsense. Because the only difference between UVA and UVB is how deep the photons reach. UVB only affects the dermis, and UVA gets a little deeper. But remember, it's not the solar radiation, it's other things and the intensity of it. So if you're living in Australia, you may want to put a lot of sunscreen on, but it doesn't seem to be working. And I'm working up to this. Let's talk about sunscreen. The first invention of sunscreen was by Franz Gruyter in the 1940s. It was zinc oxide. And zinc oxide is a pretty good sunscreen, blocks almost 99% of the UVA and UVB, and it doesn't absorb into the skin. That's why they got away from using it, because it's messy. It stays on the skin, it doesn't absorb in, so you can get it all over your clothes and your beach towel, and now you've got sand on your nose and you don't look that good. So they started to get away from zinc oxide for purely cosmetic reasons, pun intended, and we went to sunscreens, which are loaded with crap. Parabens in sunscreen have been proven to mess with your hormones. Proven. Oxybenzone has been linked to hives, contract dermatitis, and damage to the epidermis, to the upper layer of the skin. Oh, that's a good idea. Let's put a lot of that stuff on. Retinol palmitate has been shown to actually increase the rates of cancer with UVA exposure. So sunscreen is stupid. And here's the clincher. The rise in melanoma in Australia is juxtaposed against the fact that the medical establishment there has been telling everybody for decades to go crazy with sunscreen. And even though everybody there has gone crazy with sunscreen, they have more melanoma than anybody in the planet. Maybe it's the ozone, I don't know. It's not the sun. Maybe it's really intense radiation because of the break in the ozone, but we don't know. But what we do know is sunscreen provides no protection whatsoever. And there's so much bad crap in it, it's a fool's errand to even consider doing it. Remember, the proper perspective brings everything into focus.